Welcome to Train Signal. You're watching how to keep your stuff safe from the bad guys, where we're going to be talking about implementing SSL for IIS 6. And if you'd like any more acronyms, I'm sure I could think of probably at least two or three more. But also, we're going to take a look at Hyper-V snapshots. I want to give you just a quickie introduction to them in this video, by the way, too. Snapshots are awesome, and we'll get to those. So in this video, the big stuff that we're going to be talking about is that we're going to be doing a quick introduction to SSL. I'm not going to get into really in-depth detail about it, but you need to know at least what it is and approximately how it works. And then I'm going to show you how to set up SSL and IIS. Now, during the demonstration, I'm going to just quickly talk to you about snapshots. We're going to do a snapshot of our web server, which is, of course, as you know, a Hyper-V machine. So that way, in case I do screw up anything, I can go ahead and revert my machine back to a previous state. It's way cool. So I'll show you how to do that during the demo section. But first of all, let's go ahead and do a quick introduction to SSL, or Secure Socket Layer. Now, what this allows you to do is encrypt data sent back and forth from servers to clients. Now, I know that if you have ever bought anything off of, say, Amazon.com or any other fairly reputable e-commerce site, you have seen SSL in action. Now, it's not something that we actively see. It's something that a lot of times goes on behind the scenes, but we need to be able to set that up. And when we encrypt data, the nice thing about it is that even if somebody does grab that data, they can't read it. So when my credit card number is going across the internet to Amazon servers, even if somebody does intercept that transmission, it's going to look like gobbledygook. All right. So SSL, by the way, uses port 443, generally speaking. And can you use it on other ports? Well, I suppose you could, but SSL is generally used on 443. So we might call it a well-known port. Now, data being sent back and forth between the client and the server that is in this particular relationship, this data is encrypted using what we call certificates. Now, what certificates are really basically secret decoder rings that are used to both identify the server and perhaps the client too, as well as used to encrypt the data using a key. So let me show you real quickly what this looks like. Whenever a client over here, let's call this client Bob. All right, so he's got some eyes there. Now, when Bob calls, let's say he goes to Amazon.com and he's going to a secure page. Well, the Amazon.com server, or whatever server it happens to be, will actually send over a copy of the public key of the certificate. Now, this SSL certificate is a small file. It gets downloaded to the client machine. And if the client machine's browser recognizes the issuer and the server of that certificate, then the client is happy. All right, there we go. And if that client is happy, then we can go ahead and we can communicate and encrypt and decrypt data as it goes across the wire. So let me go ahead and clear the screen here a little bit. So let's talk about when a secure page is actually sent over to our happy little client over here. Let's bring his face back because, you know, I like that. When a page that is secure is sent over, it's actually encoded or encrypted using the secret key in the SSL certificate. So a page is now sent over. Now that data that is sent over is encoded, but the client can use the SSL certificate that it received earlier to decrypt and decode that information and be able to make sense out of it. The exact same thing happens when the client machine sends something back over to the server. That data is also encoded or encrypted. And since both the server and the client both have these nifty certificates, when data that is encrypted is sent back over to the server can then decrypt that information and make good use of it. All right? So pretty simplistic in its theory. There's a lot that goes on underneath the hood, obviously. But again, I want to give you just a basic core understanding of it so I can show you how to implement it, because implementing it is actually pretty easy. Now, one quick note I do want to mention to you, using SSL, it does require more processing overhead for encryption and decryption. So if you have a server that is only doing stuff over SSL, it's going to take a little more time for it to encrypt and decrypt, encode and decode that information that's being sent back and forth between the clients. So you may have an appearance of slowness. Okay? It may reduce the appearance of speed of that particular server. That's also why not every single page on the internet that you see is transmitted using SSL, because it takes too much time on the server side and the client side to process, decrypt, and encrypt and all that rigmarole. So not every page should be encrypted, okay? Although sometimes, depending upon the sensitivity of the information that's being transmitted back and forth, maybe it is. Just make sure that your server has a strong enough processor and good enough RAM to handle that if that is the case. Here's the deal. Hank is now worried that sensitive data may be compromised via transmission on the SharePoint site. How do we know that? Well, Hank was saying, well, I was watching the news last night, and that one guy was talking about how a whole mess of data got stolen off of somebody's intranet site, and now I know we've got one. I think we better make sure that don't happen. And, of course, you said, don't worry, Mr. Richardson, sir. We'll have that internet site secured in no time. I'm watching a video right now about how to do just that. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So now you understand why we are encrypting data. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be securing our SharePoint site using SSL. Now, in order to set up SSL for our SharePoint site, there's a couple things we need. First of all, we do need an SSL certificate. Okay. Now, you can buy a certificate from a third party like VeriSign, GoDaddy, etc. Or in Server 2008, you can also use a self-signed certificate from the server. And by the way, this is probably not the best idea, just so you know. A self-signed certificate, unless you're going to take other measures so that every computer, every client machine in your network recognizes and trusts that particular server, this may not necessarily be the best go. But you can, if you just need the encryption, you can use a self-signed certificate from the server, and I'll show you how to implement that. This is probably the easiest, but maybe not the best, due to the fact that your browsers might holler and scream when you try to use one. Now, you can also use a certificate generated from a Server 2008 or Server 2003 certificate authority. Now, certificate authority is a server role, and we can actually create certificates using that particular server role. Now, the one that we're going to be focusing in on here is that when we installed SharePoint, SharePoint actually generated a certificate for us. All right. Now, is this the best option? Actually, the absolute best option is to buy one from a third party. Second best option is to use a certificate generated from inside of your network using a Server 2008 or 2003 certificate authority, but this one is at least better than using a self-signed certificate, although there's not a lot of difference. Just so you know, right up front, there's not a lot of difference, because that certificate is actually generated and it's more or less a self-signed certificate. But when we installed SharePoint, we got a certificate, so we might as well use what's there. And if we need to upgrade it later on, we'll be able to do that as well. Okay, then we need to install the certificate, or we need to verify that the SharePoint certificate actually already exists. Now remember, that certificate is really what's going to enable us to use SSL. If you don't have a certificate, you're going to be out of luck securing your data transmission back and forth. After we install or verify that the certificate is in existence on our IIS server, we need to set up what we call a binding for that SharePoint site so that it can use HTTPS and port 443 in order to transmit and receive data over the network. Now, after we get that set up, then we just need to make sure that we instruct the users to access our SharePoint 80 site using HTTPS instead of HTTP. Now, we may want to unbind, if you will, the HTTP protocol. We may not even want our users to have access to the SharePoint site that is unsecured. But that's going to be one of those questions that we're going to leave up to our new SharePoint web developer. We'll get an answer for him later on. I mean, this is basically what we're going to do. I mean, it's not rocket science. It's pretty easy. And I'm going to show you how to do that right now. So let's go ahead and move on over to the server. And let's start taking a look at the SSL stuff. But actually first, before we do that, before we start getting into configuring the secure socket layer stuff, I want to show you just a quick note about snapshots, and then we'll get into this binding of ports and all of that, all right? All right, so you see that we're over here on web1-globo. And let's go ahead and let's take a look at how to do a quick snapshot. I want to talk to you through snapshots here real quick. I'm going to restore this down so that we're actually seeing this particular virtual machine in a window, because this is a Hyper-V machine, remember. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick snapshot of this particular machine as it stands right now. Now here's something I want to show to you in kind of a confession time here. I've actually been taking snapshots of the web server. I'm going to click on Web 1 inside of the Hyper-V Server Manager. See, I've actually been taking snapshots of the web server pretty much after everything that I do that's major. The advantage to taking a snapshot is that let's say I really screw something up. Let's say I just completely blow the server up. It's not that big a deal because what I could do is I could actually right-click on any one of these snapshots and I could apply it. So I actually get the ability to go back in time, if you will, to each snapshot. And I really kind of get a second chance or third chance or fourth chance, however many times I want to go back and reapply these snapshots. It's a very cool technology. It's very easy to do. Let me go ahead and show you how to create a snapshot here. I'm clicking on Web 1 to bring up Web 1 again. And you see there's a button right here, Snapshot. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the Snapshot button. I know, wow. It's a good thing I'm here to show you this, huh? Because, I mean, really, if I wasn't here to show you this, you never would have known to click on the button, right? Yeah, I know. All right, so let's call this snapshot before SSL. And I'll tell it yes. And so what it's going to do is it's going to take basically a picture of the virtual machine as it stands. And in case I do end up messing up my SSL configuration and I don't really remember what I did, then I can just go back to the snapshot that I just created. Let me go ahead and minimize my virtual machine here again. Let's go back to the server manager for our Hyper-V. The snapshot happened pretty fast. Now you see that I actually have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different points that I could go back to in case I blew something up. And anytime that I want to go back to any one of these states, I simply right-click on the snapshot and click on Apply. Now, by the way, since I do have the snapshot already in place, I'm going to go ahead and click on Apply. And then when you see that, it's going to ask you, are you sure that you want to apply the snapshot after FTP install? The virtual machine's current state will be lost. Well, you could take another snapshot and then apply the old one so you could bounce back and forth if you really wanted to, if you had the time for the machine to restore back to those 2 points. It's not something that we're going to do right now. We're actually not going to create snapshots or reapply this old snapshot at all, so I'm going to click on Cancel. But kind of a fun thing to keep in mind as you're working with, and especially as you're learning Server 2008, if you have a Hyper-V machine available and you're able to take snapshots, go ahead and punch around on a Hyper-V Server 2008 machine, but don't forget to take the snapshots because it's super easy to go back to places where you have been in case you really squirrel something up. Okay, so enough about snapshots. Just wanted to take one real quick and show you where to find these at, just in Hyper-V Manager. Let's go back over to our web server now, and let's talk about SSL, where we might find all of this SSL stuff. Now, I'm here actually in Server Manager, and remember that normally when I'm in the IIS Services Manager, I like to turn off the console tree, right? So I can see everything that's happening, especially at this lower resolution. Well, first of all, in order to take care of the SSL certificate thing, we have to be on the Web 1 global level, okay, or the web server level itself, and not in the site section. We'll do the site section later on, but we have to first contend with stuff at the server level. So I'm going to scroll down here a little bit, down into the IIS section, and you see here are my server certificates. I'm going to go ahead and double click on server certificates, and let's see if we do have any certificates. And here is that certificate that was created for us by the SharePoint installation. So we actually already have an SSL certificate here. Now we can go ahead and just use this one if we want to ensure that our data is secure and encrypted, moving back and forth between the server and the client machines. Now, if we wanted to create a self-signed certificate, we could do that too. I'm going to go ahead and click on this. This one is really super easy. I'm just going to call this, Happy Cert. And it's going to go ahead and tell it OK. And now I have a new certificate called Happy Cert is issued to the Web 1 Global Mantic server And you'll see here is any other vital information that you need to know about it. Could I use this certificate in order to enable SSL? Since my SharePoint server is going to be on the inside of the router and not exposed to the outside, at least not that we know of anyway, could I go ahead and use this? Yes, because it will ensure that the traffic is encrypted going back and forth to the server. Now, if we do use this certificate, we do run the risk of having people's browsers be angry with them because Internet Explorer and even Mozilla Firefox don't generally like self-signed certificates. Anybody can create a self-signed certificate. And so part of this whole security and SSL thing is actually getting a certificate from a certificate authority that browsers intrinsically trust. Do browsers intrinsically trust self-signed certificates? Absolutely not. Unless you have something turned off, you're going to get a warning box that says, hey, I'm not sure that you really want to trust the certificate coming from this particular server. But if you're in a pinch and you absolutely need to have SSL enabled, this will work in a crunch, and you'll just need to instruct your users to go ahead and accept the certificate that you'll be prompted for whenever you're trying to open up that particular website. Okay, now let's also really quickly, I want to talk to you about how do you get certificates from third-party as well as certificate authorities. Well, first of all, you do have to create a certificate request. You have to fill in all this information. It's very wizardized, but it is super easy here. We're actually going to end up getting stuck. I'm just going to fill in some quick dummy information here just so you can see the next screen. Tell it next. Here we can select the cryptographic service provider and a bit length. Here's the general rule. The greater the bit length, the stronger the encryption, so it's going to take a lot longer to break the encryption on data transmitted at 4096 than it is at 1024. But also, a greater bit length may decrease performance, so that's something that you want to keep in mind. For the time being, I'm going to leave these as a default and tell it next. Now I'm going to specify a name for the certificate request. I'm going to click on this little builder dude here and get up a file browser. Now basically, since I do not have a third-party certificate authority or an internal certificate authority, I'm only going to be able to take you up to at least the point of creating the certificate request. But here's what's going to happen. After you generate the certificate request, as I'm about to do here now, I'm going to go ahead and save this guy to the desktop, and we'll call it cert REQ. It's going to create a small file that has information for creating a certificate by another server somewhere else, either a third party or on the internal side of our network. Let's go ahead and go to the desktop here, and let's take a look at what's actually in this certificate request. Go ahead and just open this guy up. It's not a very big file, but then the certificate authority, either the third party or internal, is going to take this mess of gobbledygook, as far as we're concerned, and create a certificate using information contained in this mess. I'll go ahead and I'm going to close this guy here. Then, let's go ahead and go back to our IIS manager. The certificate authority will generate for us an actual certificate, and then we can use the complete certificate request, at which point we'll select the file that the certificate authority has created for us, and then we can give it a friendly name, Happy Cert 2. Now I'll actually be able to complete this one because I have not submitted that certificate request to any certificate authority. All right, I'm going to cancel out here. So if you're going to get a certificate from another server, you'll need to use those two links. Let me get this out of the way here. There we go. Create certificate request and complete certificate request in order to actually install an SSL certificate onto the server. Now, creating a domain certificate, by the way, does require an internal certificate authority, just so you know. Or we might be able to, if we have an existing certificate, we could also import a particular certificate file as well. Now, what Hank has the directive that he has given to us at this point in time is not to go out to a third party and get a third party certificate. And by the way, those can be really expensive. Some of them can be upwards of $10,000 just for the certificate. We do not have that authorization, so we're going to be using either the Happy Cert self-signed certificate or the certificate that was created whenever we installed SharePoint. All right, so now we have 2 server certificates to select. Next, what we need to do is we're going to go to our SharePoint site because this is the one that Hank is concerned about. Now here's what I'm going to do in order to enable SSL on this particular site. I'm going to right click on it and select Edit Bindings. I'm going to click on Add, and what we're going to do is we're going to add in the HTTPS binding, and we'll leave all unassigned as it is, and we're going to be using port 443. I want you to remember that. That is the well-known port for SSL stuff, okay? Hostname is grayed out, nothing we can do with that. So SSL certificate, we have 2 certificates, one of which is our SharePoint certificate, and here's our self-signed certificate. Let's go ahead and let's try our self-signed certificate first, and let's see how we do, okay? If this one doesn't work, then we may have to use the SharePoint one. Let's go ahead and we're going to tell it okay. So what we're doing is we are actually assigning and telling IIS and saying, hey, I want you to use and make available access to this website via port 443 using HTTPS and using my self-signed certificate. Okay, so now we've got that set up. Let's go ahead and let's click on close. Now at this stage in the game, we do know that previously our SharePoint site did work by going to http://web1-globo. Well, let's go ahead and let's try on the home server that we're actually on first, and then if we get really bold and brave, maybe we'll try on a Vista client. So I'm going to go ahead and just open up an Internet Explorer here. And now I'm going to go ahead and try to go to the website by going to https://web1-globo. Hey, look, you're about to view pages over a secure connection. Any information you exchange with the site cannot be viewed by anyone else on the web. Neat. Let's tell it okay. And let's see if we get that warning from the use of the self-signed certificate. We may, oh, yep, here it is. There's a problem with this website security certificate. The security certificate presented by the website was issued for a different website's address. I'm not sure what that's about. But basically, when you see this, it may mean that there is an actual problem with the certificate. Well, I happen to know that right now there is not a problem with the certificate on this website. So I'm going to click on continue to this website, not recommended. It's telling me again, yes, that's fine. Hey, look. I just think we might be able to get into this. Let's see here. Now, by the way, while this thing is thinking about bringing up the web page and logging me in, I just want to let you know that you're probably not going to have entire websites accessed via HTTPS. You're probably only going to have certain sections of your websites, maybe only certain pages of your website being accessed via this SSL method. Otherwise, it takes too long for even the most basic pages to be coded and decoded back and forth between the servers. All right, you're about to leave a secure internet connection. Yes, that's fine. Oh, looks like it's kicking me back out here. So that probably means is that I'm probably going to have to also set up SSL inside of SharePoint. Well, let's find out here for just a second. Wow, this is taking a really long time. Let's go ahead, let's bounce on over to a Vista client. What do you say? Well, this thing is thinking about it. Let's go ahead and use our time wisely here. So we'll let the Web 1 rest for a second. Let's go over to a virtual Vista client that I actually created earlier and is currently living on the Hyper-V machine. And I could also, by the way, if I was so desired, do snapshots on this one as well. Let's go ahead and expand this here. Let's go ahead and we'll log in here as the web developer account. All right, there we are. But you see here that, wait a minute, something didn't work quite right here. You'll notice that HTTP is our new protocol. That's not quite right. So what we're going to have to do is we're probably going to have to go in and into our central administration website. We need to enable SharePoint to actually utilize SSL. Currently, it is not. Even though it's been enabled on the server, SharePoint is an application. And as such, applications require information and also we require to be told what to do with certain things such as SSL. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the Central Administration website. So this will actually be the second time where we'll be seeing this Central Administration website in this course. Might take just a little bit for it to load up here. All right, let's go ahead and we'll log in again as the administrator here. Do keep in mind that I generally am logging in as the local administrator, just in case you are following along at home. And there we go. And so now let's go over to the operations section, and what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating what we call an alternate access mapping. I'm going to go ahead and click on it, and basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to be specifying an internal URL, because remember, we're not publishing this to the outside. And I think I mentioned this before, but I do want to mention it once again. If you're going to be publishing a SharePoint site to the outside world, your best bet is to use IIS server. All right, so let's go ahead and let's click on Add Internal URLs. All right, so first of all, what we need to do is we need to select an alternate access mapping collection, and we have no selection, so we'll change alternate access mapping collection, and we're going to select SharePoint 80. So we will select SharePoint 80, and now we're going to put in https://web1-globo:443. So we can very directly specify which port we're going to be using for this particular URL so that our users can get to the secure page as well. So for the zone, let's go ahead and let's specify intranet and click on Save. Now again, while this thing is saving here, you'll notice I selected SharePoint 80, right? SharePoint 80 is our main SharePoint site. And there we go. So now we have a specific internal URL that we can utilize using port 443. Now, in terms of accessing SSL for other applications, it's going to be application specific, just so you know. I've shown you how to set up SSL here in SharePoint, okay? All right, let's go ahead and let's go back on over to our team site now. Let's see if we can get to, tell you what, I need to go ahead and I need to log out of this site here. We're going to try that HTTPS again. And so while I was logging out, I'll go ahead and I'll put in the URL here for it, web1-globo, and then we'll do :443, so we make sure that we get to our HTTPS port. Well, I don't really have to put that in there, but you know, I could have just typed in https://web1-globo, but you know, I'm just a little bit old school sometimes. Hey, there we go. We got a certificate error again. Okay, content from the website is being blocked. Let's click on Add. Yes. We will add this website to the zone. We'll click on Add and close. And now let's see how we do. Okay, well, we did get this time to the HTTPS version of the site. We do have a certificate error though. Let's click right here on it and let's see what we do have. And it's telling us that we have a mismatched address. So what we really have is we have an issue with the certificate. Let's click on View Certificates. Let's see which certificate are we actually using. All right, so now we'll click on Details. The issuer here is the one that I want to point out to you right now. The issuer here is web1-globo.globomantics.com. This is probably actually our self-signed certificate. The certificate tells us that it's okay. Now, in the General tab, you'll see that this certificate is intended for the following purpose: ensures the identity of a remote computer. We could actually install the certificate so that we don't end up with those certificate errors. So that means if we're going to utilize that self-signed certificate on every single one of our machines, then we either need to make some alterations using group policy to ensure that this particular HTTPS site certificate is recognized. We're not going to do that right now because I also want to show you something else real quick here. I want to go back to our server manager and really our IIS manager. And tell you what, let's go ahead and let's see if we can switch our certificate that we're using and see if we get a different set of results. So I'm going to right click here on the SharePoint-80 site, And instead of using the certificate that's there, we'll use the other one. And once again, I'm just going to go in here. I'm going to edit the bindings for this particular site. I'm going to select HTTPS. Here's our 443 port that we're using. I'm going to click on Edit. And we were using the Happy Cert certificate. Let's go ahead and switch it over here to the certificate that was created during the SharePoint installation. We'll go ahead and we'll select that one. We'll tell it OK. And now we'll go ahead and we'll click on Close. So what we're going to do this time, tell you what, let's go over to a Vista machine and let's see if we can get to our HTTPS enabled site over using a different machine. I'm just going to use actually this Vista client here that actually installed in Hyper-V just so I can have a Vista machine to play with. All right, and so it looks like it's going to try to take me to a homepage of msn.com. I'm not crazy about that. Let's go ahead and stop that. And let's try to get to our SharePoint site now. And let's see how we do. Let's see if we get that same certificate error over on a client that we ended up with. Oh, yep. Looks like we still are getting that a similar issue here. It's a little bit different though. This security certificate presented by this website was not issued by a trusted certificate authority. All right, so we're actually seeing the same problem that we had with our self-signed certificate. The security certificate presented by this website was issued for a different website's address. Okay, well, these are the problems that we're going to encounter if we're using self-signed certificates or the certificate from SharePoint. But here's the thing, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click on the More Information one here. See if there's any additional information that might help me. No, not really. We're going to go ahead and continue to this website, even though Microsoft's preference is that we didn't. That's okay. That doesn't bother me. So what's our best solution here? Well, our best solution is to go buy a certificate from somebody else, right? At least a third-party solution, or we're going to have to do something in group policy to make sure that this certificate is recognized by all the clients. Because if your users try to go to your SharePoint site and they get this, they're going to be very angry, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and just close this one out. We do know that the SSL does work for this one. But the issue that we're going to be running into, though, is with that self-signed certificate and that SharePoint certificate as well. Is this a workable situation? Yeah, it's workable. We could probably get something done with it. Is it the best? Well, probably not. Okay, but again, the best thing that we could do at this point would be to go back here to web1-globo and then use that certificate request and complete certificate request against a third party or certificate authority and get a real certificate. Okay, so I've shown you how to basically make this work at a very basic primary level. Now, we don't have a certificate authority on our network right now. And Hank has not given me the authority to go buy a third-party certificate. So we're probably going to have to, at least initially, instruct our users to go ahead and continue onto the site and then install the certificates. And that's probably going to take an email or, intra-office mail or something providing that procedure. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's go back on over to our slides and let's do some wrap-up now. All right, so let's talk about some vocabulary here. First of all, SSL, Secure Socket Layer, a protocol used to encrypt data transmitted over a network to protect sensitive information. A certificate is a digital file that both identifies a server, client, or site and provides the key to encryption or decryption of data, and usually both. Remember that 443 is the well-known port for SSL traffic, and that a binding is when we actually attach a port to a particular protocol. Like what we did with our SharePoint site, we actually created a binding to 443 for Secure Socket Layer. Now, after watching this video, you should be able to install a self-signed certificate in IIS. Now, we know that's not the best thing, but sometimes we got to do what we got to do. You should also be able to use an existing certificate created by a SharePoint installation. I showed you how to accomplish that. You should be able to create snapshots of a Hyper-V machine. I showed you how easy that is. Isn't that crazy? How easy it is to create a snapshot of a particular machine and then reapply it so you can kind of go back in time. And also, I've shown you how to edit bindings to include HTTPS on port 443 for a website. All right, friends. Well, that wraps up this video. Let's go ahead and let's move on to the next one where we're going to start talking about terminal services.